be pragmatic. Do not set goals that you cannot reach. At the same time, do not set goals that are very easy to reach. Yeah. So be very pragmatic.
That was Adnan Fakir. He's best known for creating the popular documentary series Finding Bangladesh. He's also known in the country's academia circuits for his work in economics and is currently pursuing a PhD on the same subject in the University of Western Australia. Now, this episode is not only the first of the brand new season of the State of the Creators, it's also probably the longest. And that's because Adnan and I have been friends for a while now, and we share interests on a wide range of topics. It's essentially a deep dive into the world of social media, the policies surrounding content regulation, funding a passion documentary, and what it means to juggle a PhD and producing creative work. Now, before we go any further, I want you to do one thing. That is, like this video on YouTube. Do it. Just do it now. If you're on YouTube, just like it. It's free. It takes you less than 5 seconds. I'll wait 5 seconds, all right? Now, the first season of the podcast featured entirely Dhaka-based creators. This season, though, will be all Perth-based locals. And I think that will create for an interesting comparison for similarities and experiences between creatives of different locations. Just through conducting these podcasts, I have already found tons of value, and I hope you'll do the same. A quick plug-in for my Instagram, which is @tausifakkas, where you can send me a DM or a message about the podcast or anything else related to creative stuff, and my website, where you can sign in for a fortnightly newsletter about being a creative online, and that's at tausifakkas.com. Alright, without further ado, this is The State of the Creators Season 2, Episode 1, featuring Adnan Fakir. Hope you enjoy the show. This is The State of the Creators, a show about creative individuals who are on a quest to build something out of nothing. I've not played one of those games.
Okay, that's fine.
But you're into gaming as well, which is quite interesting because I never thought of you as someone who spends time there, spend time in gaming, especially with so many things going on in your life. Has that been more of an escape factor, or do you actually enjoy gaming in itself? Like, do you actually build up skills and do you like compete and stuff, or is it just more like I need to get out of this shithole?
It's more like the escape factor. So what happens is that I don't play games for like 1 or 2 months, but then I pick up a game and I just want to get lost in that world, so I play continuously for 3-4 days or 5 days and then don't play again.
What's your favorite game of all time?
Witcher 3.
How many times have you?
Twice.
Fair enough.
But I still did not get the platinum there, so I want to at some point, but it's so time consuming that I've never gotten around to do that.
Is Witcher the same one with the arrow to the knee?
No. Well,
I'm mixing up my memes.
No, that's fine. Like,
no, which is the one with the documentary after? Oh, no, the documentary.
The Henry Cavill one.
Yeah,
and the TV series,
Yeah, the TV show after. What's the arrow to the knee? The whole meme about getting arrow to the knee. Never mind. I'm confusing it with another.
No, that's fine.
I goes to show I'm not really a gamer. It's my gaming's literally starts with FIFA, ends with Call of Duty.
Good enough.
And initially it was GTA. But I just don't have the patience. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Obviously we've been friends for a while now through through mutuals and things like that, and it's interesting to really see your trajectory of knowing each other.
Yeah, true. Because I've known of you for so long.
Same thing. And I think it's only after you've moved to Australia when I've started really knowing you. Yeah. Like knowing you kind of thing. And prior to that it was I know, and before that was like, I know of Mr. Fakir.
Mr. Oh my god.
Do you want me to go with Miss?
No.
It's all fine. In this show, it's all inclusive. So for people unfamiliar with your work, with who you are, tell us who is Adnan Fakir?
That's a difficult question to answer because I sort of like have different identities to different people because different people know different sides of me. Yeah. So a lot of people know me through Finding Bangladesh. That's where the majority of the identity comes in. But to a lot of people, I'm the economist. To a lot of people, I'm the teacher who used to teach at Brack University. And so it really does vary. But if you want like a concrete identity of myself, if I ask that same question to myself, I think I have two legs on two boats. And for quite a while, I was going into that debate, like which boat do I really want to lean towards? But then I think economics won out. And Finding Bangladesh is more of a passion project. Right?
But what fascinates me more is, I guess, the researching capabilities you've built. Was it more so through PhD, or was it something you already had in you, this investigative research, constant statistic dissect and stuff like that?
Okay, I did not expect this conversation to go this way, but brilliant.
It's turning into a less of a creative podcast and more academic. The reason being, I'll actually turn this into social media in a second, because I'm quite passionate about research, right? And I feel the reason why social media is struggling these days is because people's lack or capability to research for themselves. And I obviously it's not their fault, but I feel that there is a significant gap in how we consume content and how we don't research enough or don't know how even, because using the internet doesn't come with a guidebook, and we're not taught in schools. You and we picked up internet kind of out of habit, and because we were kind of molded into this lifestyle. But 9 out of 10 people, especially the older generation, even the younger ones, don't really know how. So I guess that's where my curiosity of research in PhD and your capability to research, interests me.
Okay, thank you. So it's something that we call the training that you get during a PhD. So the PhD is kind of like the building block, the first step towards actual research, because even during your master's, you are still building up your theoretical foundations, and in your master's dissertation, you're applying some of it. But see, one of my biggest challenges was that, at least in Bangladesh, at least at BRAC University, and I'm not saying anything against the university, but I did not have a research role model, per as to say.
Right.
Because especially in economics research, there is a very particular way of thinking that you have to understand. And the challenge is, once again, to be able to think out of the box within that framework.
Right.
Like, for example, bringing in lightning data to figure out the disruptions in radio frequencies and how we can utilize that as an exogenous shock, something that's not correlated with anything else. So these are the ideas that we have to think of. And the thing that I really like about economics is that economics is very interdisciplinary. So in the sense that you can bring in a lot of topics from a lot of other disciplines and then merge that with the economic theories. So that is definitely helpful, but at the same time, it's a very ongoing process. Like, if I say that I am a proper economist now, not true at all. I still have a long way to go. And I think the best way to be able to develop a research mind is to keep on reading about all the amazing things that people are doing.
Right.
And the discussions that we have. Like at the UWA economics department, we have seminars twice a week. And the only idea of these seminars is that one person presents and the other people sort of like gang up on that person. It's like, okay, this could go wrong. This could go wrong. How do you fix that? How do you fix that? And that's like a continuous flow of ideas for straight 1.5 hours or 2 hours twice a week. And I think that really helps to build your thinking. So
it's super interesting, because that's exactly what I feel is or should be an antidote to these echo chambers that we've built for social media, because we only get one point of view. We've built, the something I call the content bubble, right? So because of algorithm, and I don't know if you've watched the Social Dilemma.
Not yet.
So that they talk about, even though I'm not a big fan of the documentary on face value, but it touches that point where we are fed information based on what we seek, and because we don't seek out the opposing viewpoints, which in your case clearly like that exercise that you guys do does create that opposing viewpoint. And obviously people go there with a free open mind, because it's not personal. It's like, we want to give you some other points of views, and that should give you and help you make an informed decision. So I guess the way you being a teacher and you being involved in these areas, how do we tackle that for social media? Like going forward, when creating content as well, should people be considering keeping these things in their minds, or should they just keep going and let YouTube and Facebook do their thing?
See, that's where I really appreciate something that you do, that you mentioned to me, that you intentionally go and search for the opposing point of view, so that like if I keep on searching only the democratic morals or principles, the only thing that Facebook and YouTube will show me are ideas related to like the democratic point of views, but not the other ones. So if we go and actively search for those, then I think that those things will pop up. But at the same time, I think building your own social circle in such a way that you have people with different points of views and you can have conversations with them comfortably with that. Right. I think that's very
both
important.
Digitally and
exactly, and in real life, and these people will end up being in your Facebook. Like some of the things that I remember just off the top of my head on Facebook, like there was this thing about how the World Health Organization was handling the pandemic, recent pandemic, and how Trump was completely against that. So I shared that. And what I really liked was that some people were actually supporting Trump in terms of how he attacked WHO, and some people were against that. And I liked the conversation there because there were both points of views flowing out. The difficulty was in terms of moderating that so that people don't end up,
killing each other.
Yeah, exactly. Or using slangs or galagalis.
It's interesting because what really bothers me with different points of views that people present, and I think when creating content, that's something as creators don't really think about, because sometimes they would, if they've got one specific point of view, they'll try to put that in regardless and not really share that, okay, this is my point of view, right? Especially with the power that people have in terms of, say, viewership, right? There's so many people, like right now having 1 million subs isn't a lot, but there's still 1 million people you have access to.
That's massive responsibility.
Exactly. And yet people don't research enough. People don't, even when creating content. So I guess while our response in our conversation was more from the point of a consumer, how as a creator then do you take that responsibility and actually create content?
See, I feel like there are two sides of the coin here. So one, certain content creators are known for certain one-sided point of views, right? So, and their audience are like that. So if they go and start giving the opposition's point of view, he or she might lose a lot of audience. So he will have, or she might have that in mind. Like, okay, so this is what I'm known for. This is my voice. So I'm going to stick to that. But at the same time, see, when the content creation is like that, you are only given one side of the story to the consumers, and some of the consumers might understand that. Some of the consumers won't think
most
deeply
don't
on
actually.
That. Yeah. So if you are going to be sensibly to be able to do that, I think that has to be your objective, honestly. Like, then the question goes back to something that I face in Finding Bangladesh at the same time. Do I want popularity? Do I want to create content that is popular and reaches out to a lot of people, or do I want to give things that are balanced per se? And I feel like content creators have to maintain that balance as well. Do I give content that shows both the pros and cons and sort of gives both sides of the story and being objective about it? And at the same time, is that going to reach enough people or not? Like, getting that balance, striking that balance is very difficult.
Right.
Like, if I go and do a lot of gali-galaj on a certain point of view that I don't really like, that is definitely going to be a lot more popular than something that is very logical and rational and less of an emotion. Okay, right. So I feel like the content with emotions that conveys a certain story and makes people feel a certain thing, those are always popular in my point of view. Whereas things that are completely logical or dry, a bit dry but rational, but can be fun at the same time, they tend to be less popular.
So should content creators, I guess, then the question becomes, like, should content creators actually take the responsibility? Because, it's a free country. I shouldn't really care. And internet's democratic, internet's democratized as hell, right? So for me, though, like, when I say me, as a content creator, for anyone, should they then be taking that step to actually be responsible, or do you think it really is the job of the big tech and the government and policymakers?
See, I feel like some content creators are creating content like that now, but obviously, if it's my subjective point of view, I feel like there should be more of them. okay, I don't mind people just bombarding with one side of the point of the view, but then again, having sort of like a discretion or being able to understand that this content creator is just one side of the story, consumers don't really understand that. So then the ideal thing would be that if Facebook and YouTube did not have that bubble algorithm so that different points of views pop up to the same people, that would be ideal. But at the same time, if I expect that majority of content creators will strike that balance in delivering their content, I think I would be expecting too much. Right. I don't think that's going to happen, at least anytime soon.
Right. Yeah. So I guess what's the way out of it here? Like, do we just wait for big tech to take that leap, or is there anything we can do as a society to actually nudge things to that direction? I mean, should we have more Trityo Matras essentially?
Yeah, essentially. So it's kind of like, yes, I think we should have that. Yeah. At least conversations in terms of how there are different points of views and there are people outside of my bubble, even in social media.
Yeah. I mean, for people who don't know Trityo Matra, this I think is mid 2000s, early 2000s political talk show with two different political parties and one interesting moderator who just sits there and watches the show go to shit. But I think, obviously we used to watch that for pure entertainment, after especially the moments where they just start throwing chairs at each other. But even now I find this as something we need to start doing a lot more of, and not just from a political angle, but for every angle, because I see more and more creators, especially with big numbers, with zero responsibility for themselves as well. And I don't think they should be off the hook either, in the sense that, if you've got a certain amount of people who pay attention to what you make and what you say and what you create, it should come with a sense of responsibility that, okay, I should be doing my due diligence, especially with people who touch on cultural and political issues, like for example Nas Daily or his good mate, like Project Nightfall and stuff like that. I'm not a big fan of them in general, but some of the stuff they put out is very dramatized, right? Like very over the top, exaggerated, and more oftentimes non-factual as well. And yet they get so many eyes on them. And of course, if you have to talk about in Bangladeshi context, there's like so many news outlets, like anything with newslive.com and reaching out to the masses, and there's no literally regulatory system. So it becomes a very, very difficult thing.
And you're absolutely right in that, because so when you were saying that to me, the parallel that I was drawing is in terms of what's happening in rural areas in Bangladesh. Like, if you think social media is one medium, one other medium in Bangladesh was commonly the mullahs. In terms of what they preach, that was completely a one-sided spreading of the message. Exactly. So that became an extreme, and look at the effect that level of fundamentalism had on Bangladesh in rural areas, especially all over the country. I'm not saying that social media is akin to that, but the story as it is developing can get something similar. Like, if you have just like if the content in the internet and social media for Bangladesh is like, if 80% leans towards just one opinion and it gets gradually more fundamentalistic because people are reinforcing each other, that singular belief or point of view becomes the point of view of the people, and that's dangerous. We always need to have opposing views to balance things out.
And I think that's where Social Dilemma, the documentary, I haven't even seen it, but that's where I feel that the whole concept of that, social media in itself is causing harm. The content being created is causing harm in general, I think is a bad notion, because it's not the right thing to say, because it's without social media, we have had extreme points of views even before. And if anything, social media is opening up even a little bit to the other side of the wall. But then you look at, like you mentioned, the rural areas, they don't have access to internet, or most didn't until recently. How it's essentially they've still gone to that one side of the point of view. If you look at political parties, otherwise we wouldn't have like people supporting a political party or a sporting team, or we wouldn't have hooligans. So do you think that humans are genetically, like inherently tribal and we can never actually get out of that?
That's a difficult question to answer. But humans are tribal, that's for sure. But
I mean, that's what I feel. I think like we're very much pushed towards the communal, the communities we resonate with.
Yeah. And I think that's like, as at least the culture of Bangladesh, that's what I can say. Like, I know that Western countries are more individualistic, like the tribal nature is less, but in Bangladesh, at least the community aspect is very rampant. The other something that you said that kind of struck me is the fact that, and I think we were having this conversation, I think it was with my supervisor a few days ago, like, is the rise of the internet in countries like Bangladesh and India, is it reinforcing fundamentalism, or is it just coming out? Was it already there before and we're just seeing it more?
Yeah, exactly. I don't think there's enough data yet to actually say that, because I feel it literally just amplifies at scale rather than it causing fundamentalism. I think it reinforces pre-existing beliefs that someone might have, and that's the problem of the bubble, the echo chambers of content. And it doesn't have to really just fundamentalism. It's about it's as simple as a sporting team, right? When I've been involved with Plantic, a football-based thing, and I've seen through Plantic how say certain clubs would only be taking information from certain club forums, groups, media entities, and when a rival club, for example, a simple incident as a red card, it would go two different ways. Even though there's like 20 cameras, there's like rule books and everything, it'll always go two different ways more often than not. But I mean, for me, that tells me that there's, it simply highlights that, okay, that this is inherently maybe a human problem. I don't know, but that's a separate conversation to have. I guess with going away from that angle of things, your creative routes as well, as you mentioned, you've created with the 2 documentaries on Bangladesh and writing poetry, publishing the book on poetry, and also being involved in music as well. So these are like very creative, and obviously, when I say creative, I mean very arts-based creative. Obviously, economics involves a lot of creativity. In essence, what has, I guess, your what has actually prompted you to find Bangladesh, I guess?
Okay. So that goes back to my school years.
Right.
So one of the things, when I was in Scholastica, first of all, we did not have Bangladesh studies then.
Right. Okay.
So that's one of the things. And I don't know the present syllabus of Bangladesh studies, at least in the O-levels and A-levels. I know what's happening at the university level. But one of the questions that I had is, we did study all the details in terms of Pal Bongsho, Shen Bongsho, and all of that. But they were taught to us in such a boring, dry manner that by the time I finished my O-levels, I completely forgot all of that.
You had no idea.
Yeah, I had no idea. And the idea of finding Bangladesh actually started from Rising Stars. So from Rising Stars, I think this is when I was in class 10, we did this survey where we wanted to see how many people... So the survey had 10 basic questions about the liberation war of Bangladesh. And then we surveyed, I believe it was 3 English medium schools and 3 Bangla medium schools, and a total of about 500 responses.
Right.
So from there, around 33%, 34, I think, roughly like that. I don't exactly remember the number, but they could not differentiate between Victory Day and Independence Day. So that struck me hard. I was like, okay, so then where is the identity? What is my identity?
Right.
And then that came up. And then that discussion eventually led to the fact that a lot of people are working with 71's history. And at that point, the Bangladesh Liberation War Museum was coming up, and that was a big thing. So then we decided that, okay, let's focus on the ancient histories of Bangladesh, and then something that we can take pride on and build our identity at the same time. And I remember that after that, we did Finding Bangladesh 1 as sort of like a pilot project. There was research, but one of the things that really prompted me deeper into it is when I was visiting Netherlands, I went to this museum, and that's the first time I saw this mythological sea creature called the Makara.
Right.
And I was like, and when I was reading the description, like, the museum in Bangladesh doesn't have detailed descriptions, but abroad it's all there, right? So when I was reading the description, the Makara's origin is from the Bay of Bengal, and it was relevant to Bangladesh. Right. Okay. And Makara is very interesting because Makara, in Bangladesh we call it Mokkor, is so Mokkor Rashi Ashe Makara theke, so the Capricorn, so that's from there. At the same time, sea serpents are, so dragons, the origin of dragons is from Drakon, and Drakon basically means sea serpents.
Right.
And I found papers in Artibus and some other archaeological journals which mention that Makara to be an ancestral form of dragons.
Right.
And that blew me away. I was like, what? Because we have like
so this was in Netherlands.
I saw this in Netherlands. I
Right.
didn't see it in Bangladesh, and that struck me. Like Scotland uses its Loch Ness monster beautifully as like a trademark, and they earned so much from tourism because of Loch Ness. It's become like a symbol. In Bangladesh, we have so many amazing stories like this that we can actually capitalize on and promote to build our identity, pride, at the same time, invest on tourism and promote it. We don't see that because we don't know majority of the stories and we don't capitalize on it.
Right.
So I think like the first step is to be able to let people know that, hey, we do have stories like this.
Right.
The second approach was that, so my dad was in BRAC from majority of his life. So he used to travel all over Bangladesh and I used to go with him. And one of the things that I saw is that a lot of these historical sites, they were dilapidated. They were breaking down, and there were no attempts at preservation. So the idea behind Finding Bangladesh is that we want to preserve these stories and these historical locations as they are right now, because we know that 10 years from now, majority of them won't exist anymore.
Right.
And without proper documentation, they're just lost. Yeah.
Wow. So with, upon getting this idea, right? Like you've just, you're still in your teens from what I can gather.
Yeah, back then.
Yeah, back then. I'm still in teens now.
Yeah, my white hair speaks.
Back then, and that's when the idea struck. How did you take it from then, okay, I need to make something around this, to actually releasing a documentary? Like what were the next steps? Did you gather a team? Do you guys, where did you go from?
Yeah, okay. So the first step was that I started writing about it in Rising Stars, because that's where I used to write. So I started writing, but from there I noticed that not everyone reads. So it was reaching a certain niche crowd, but not really everyone. And then a bunch of us friends, we decided that, okay, let's try to make videos from them. And then from there we were like, okay, if we are actually going to do it, we have to do our proper research first. So the research phase came in, and then we started visiting all these places. And once we started visiting, we decided, okay, the easier medium, and this is back in 2006. That's when
mid-2000s.
Yeah, so that's when we started the journey. Video content and documentaries and films were not rampant in Bangladesh at all.
Yeah.
But we knew that it was happening a lot abroad. So we were like, okay, let's see if we can reach the younger crowd. That's where our target was, using a fun documentary. So in Finding Bangladesh 1, we ended up making this vehicle called Damsel in Distress.
Right.
And it was like a boat with wheels, and we tried to travel with that, add some comedy and some flares with that. And then we tied that into the different story making, etc., bringing in animations and 3D aspects of it. But the journey was, so that was the reason. The reason was that we thought it would be easier to reach the younger generation through that medium. But we knew nothing about documentary filmmaking. So the entire process was a journey in terms of learning by doing.
Right.
But the good thing was that everyone liked the idea. So whenever I was talking about it with my friends, they all liked it. They all wanted to be a part of it. And that's how the team grew. And a lot of people helped us throughout the way, because they simply believed in what we were doing. Like Unmad, all the artwork that we have were supplied by Unmad, and majority of them, they did not charge anything at all. A lot of the animation that we did were in-house, so we didn't have expenses related to that. Obviously, there were still other expenses that had to be taken care of, but the idea was that we wanted to do this by ourselves, and we wanted to learn and develop ourselves along the process. The good thing that came out of that is that a lot of the people who worked in Finding Bangladesh, at least in the second part, are in the media world now in very prominent places, and they used Finding Bangladesh as sort of their stepping stone to get there. So I'm really proud of that aspect of it, that they have gone and now are doing things by themselves and are established.
It sounds like a very big collaborative effort to get it off the charts. So I guess, what were the main roadblocks? I mean, obviously creating a documentary in Bangladesh at a time when I guess even like researching in Bangladesh is such a pain from personal experience. And then actually to go out and do something and explaining to people that, you know what, I'm going to make this vehicle and then I'm going to go around and tell stories about random monsters in mythology. Like, I guess obviously there's the people aspect, but also there's that technical aspect as well. What were the main roadblocks and challenges? I guess roadblocks being quite literal. But
So Finding Bangladesh 1 was released in 2008. The main roadblocks, and that was terrible when I look back to it in retrospect. But
so terrible being like the actual output.
That's my opinion. But at that point, a lot of people really enjoyed it, and the only reason I say terrible is probably because we have evolved over time. And we did not have funding, and we did not want to take corporate sponsorship because we knew that if we took that, the content that we create would be dictated by whatever corporate entity there would be there, and we wanted to be free of that. So we decided not to take any money from anyone and to go ahead and make it ourselves. So the entirety of Finding Bangladesh 1 was shot using a point-and-shoot camera. It was a Sony point-and-shoot camera. It was like VGA video, not even, and we later upscaled that to 720, but it was not even HD. And and then we did not have proper audio equipment, so we got a Zoom H4n. That's sort of like when we're learning how to capture all of that. So the biggest hurdle, first of all, was getting reliable information, and that's where some professors from Dhaka University helped us out quite a bit. That was a big step. Especially from the history department, but at least they could point us towards resources that were reliable.
So how do you get in connection? So you're obviously like young people and stuff like that, and without like obviously now it's easier for you, but back then, how did you reach out?
You would have to go to them physically, wait outside their office, and wait for an appointment and see. Okay, so I remember the first time I went to meet Mansoor sir. So he used to teach at Dhaka University History Department, and later he was with Brack University as well. I remember that I had to wait like 2 hours, just sit out there, wait him to be free, and then there was the point of making him understand what.
And then the actual pitch.
Yeah, exactly. So luckily he liked it, and then he was supportive of that. There was the other major hurdle of convincing my own parents that hey, this is worth it. Because I remember my parents were quite protective of me in terms of getting outside of Dhaka alone, because I was in class 9-10 and it's expected until until in A-levels I actually ran away from home with 3 of my friends so the idea was that
a shoot for
we wanted to simply ride a bicycle from Dhaka to Cox's Bazar. Okay.
And did you end up?
We ended up doing that. So
awesome.
It was with me, Nawaf, Shabab and Rufi. So the 4 of us, we ended up cycling from Dhaka to Cox's Bazar in 6 days.
So did you run away because of that, or did you run away after a fight and you're like, screw that, I'm just going to
No. I just ran away because of that.
You wanted to do that? Okay.
Yeah. So my parents knew that I was in my mama's house.
Yes.
And then when my mama, when my mom used to call my mama used to call me back and it's like, call your mom. I was like, okay. But then I got caught. But anyway, so after that, the advantage of doing that, and I'm not saying that people should do that at all, but this is how it started. After that, my dad got like, okay, if you want to go somewhere, go, but just let us know.
They just realized that they can't stop you from being the wild
so
soul that you are.
Yeah, that helped. So after that, when I did travel around Bangladesh, there was no barriers from the side of my parents. The other things. There are a lot more stories from Finding Bangladesh 2, the second part, which is more recent. That made me realize a lot of things about Bangladesh, but that's when I've gotten older.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess we'll get to that eventually.
Yeah. So did you was that easier for Finding Bangladesh 2 once you've used that?
Yeah. Because Finding Bangladesh 1 already gave us a footing in terms of people knew what we were doing and people really liked it. And 1 was more like a pilot project. So 2 was like, we want to do this properly now.
Right.
So a lot more people came forward willingly, and there was a lot of adventure, especially in Sundarban, and there's this temple in Kaliganj near the border with India that's like 6 kilometers away from that. There are a lot of fun stories there, and I think that's the best part about all of this. Like, everyone should travel to these places.
Yes.
Yeah.
How can you make that happen though? Like, say for example, I would love to explore, but I know that it is a bit of a risk if you have never done that.
Yeah.
So how do we then change that mindset, not just for the people, but also for the government to take this seriously?
Okay. See, the first thing would be that if you're going to backpack around Bangladesh, it's not going to be a comfort journey. That's the first thing. If you're looking for like a comfortable trip, it's go to Cox's Bazar, stay in a hotel, and all of that. Yeah. But if you really want to get to these routes, like one of the things that I really want people to realize in Bangladesh is that rural people in Bangladesh are actually very hospitable. Like one of these times I remember, and obviously you're not going to travel alone, travel in groups. Correct. That gives the extra security. Yeah. Like the Kaliganj place that I was telling you about, it's in Shatkhira. So there's a broken down Nabarotno temple there, so 9-spire temple. And we wanted to cover that for Finding Bangladesh too, because we were focusing on Khulna and Borishal division. So one of the things that happened is we were going to camp and stay there the night. And so when we were scouting, this is not during the shooting, when we were scouting, we go there and we set up a tent and we're going to stay the night there and everything. So it's like you have to cross Chingri's Kher. Chingri's Kher মাঝখান যে আইলগুলো আছে, আইলের উপর দিয়ে হেঁটে হেঁটে you have to walk for around 2 kilometers and go there. So there are no villages or anything around. It's just only Chingri's Kher. That's it. And then there's the India's border on that end. And when we were going, the village people were like, be careful there because the border guards are there. They might fire. So don't go near the border and everything. I was like, okay. So we camped up and we stayed there. And then at night around, I think it was almost midnight, we see that a group of people are coming from this small village, roughly 2 to 3 kilometers away. They have torches in their hands. So moshal hate niye amader dike haite ashteche. And we're like, fuck. I shouldn't use that word, but fine. Oh god. It's okay. Yeah. And we're like, what are we going to do? If they want to rob us or do something, we are screwed entirely. And what surprised me is that when they came, I was so ashamed because they just came over to talk with us and to check up on us that whether we are okay or not. And they brought food and then we had food together. And I was like,
blown away.
Yeah, I was like, what is this mentality that I have in my head? These are people with really good intentions and being friendly with us. And those are the first thoughts that went through my head.
Right.
This is back in 2013. And I felt so ashamed after that. I was like, no, because of all the travels that I did in Bangladesh, and for Finding Bangladesh too, we had like 72 days of traveling and shooting. Right. Everywhere that we went, people were always hospitable, as long as you respect them back. So that's important. It's point of views that you share and how you talk to them and all of that. But they were always very friendly, like no matter where we went. And I think that's an aspect that people don't realize about Bangladesh when traveling. They're always scared in terms of security. But as long as you travel in a certain pack, going to these villages and staying in remote areas, we did not have a trouble at all.
Right. Wow.
So I think that's an aspect that people really should explore. And it's something that you understand as you go there.
As you actually make travel. One aspect of, like of the documentary, like if you made the documentary, you had the idea, you went out, connected with people. How do you go about making money out of it? So obviously it's not a cheap thing. You've got a full team, editing, traveling, all that kind of stuff. How did you go about, I guess, making it into a sustainable project?
Okay, so that's where... So what we did with Finding Bangladesh one is that we initially, I was the one who made majority of the investments. And then we recuperated the investments post... once we got the sponsorship. So Dhaka Bank had sponsored the first one. And the second one, we took a similar approach. Some of us together, we made the investments, and there were certain philanthropists who decided to invest as well. And those investments were on the basis in terms of that, hey, we're going to eventually, once we make the money, we'll eventually pay them back. And so the funding approach was really in terms of convincing people of the idea that's there, and people who believed in it and were philanthropists, they are the ones who mostly invested. But then we did win a competition with Startup Bangladesh, and that gave us a chunk of the funding to finish the project. That was under the ICT ministry. And finally the Finding Bangladesh 2 Bangladesh Aharno Golpo was sponsored by Robi. So that's where the bigger chunk of the profit or the revenue generation came back. So the idea was that we wanted to have enough funds left after everything so that we can start working on part 3. The advantage of Finding Bangladesh is that since it's not a profit-making initiative, in the sense that none of us take money from it, we all do it because we love doing it. So the amount of expenses is much lower compared to any other professional documentary making endeavors. So that's the one advantage we have. Even then, it's a massive chunk of money. So, but I can only imagine what professional documentary filmmakers would have to go through, and that is probably why we don't see that many high-quality documentaries coming out. At least some things that involve traveling and a lot of those expenses. That was the entire funding scheme, essentially.
So obviously then you have to go and deal with brands afterwards. So what was it like? Like, how did you go about getting them? What's it like dealing with them going forward?
Dealing with them is never fun. Let me just put it straightforward. I guess in terms of approaching them, one of the good things was that at least Finding Bangladesh team members are really well networked within Dhaka. So someone or the other always knew someone or the other in this company or that company, right? So in terms of approaching them, we always started pulling the threads in the network, and that's what we initially approached. But even people who had no idea about what Finding Bangladesh is, as long as you have that 3-minute pitch that's well refined and you know how to grab their attention, that always helps.
So 3 minutes pitch, 3-minute pitch about whatever you're doing. Like,
what the idea is behind Finding Bangladesh. Not really the content of it, but the idea.
How do you go about making a 3-minute pitch? Like what would you, is there a formula behind it? Like, what would you recommend?
It's kind of like, so see, it to me it really varies from person to person. So if I went to a government official and I gave that 3-minute pitch behind the idea of Finding Bangladesh, it wouldn't captivate them. So, but it does catch a certain crowd. Like the concept behind bringing these stories to people, especially the young generations who are going to grow up and how their mindsets are going to get shaped. These kind of pitches really appeal to people who are not, whose primary objective is not money making or profit maximization. It's morely in terms of the morals and ethics and the values they want to put forward. And the other thing is the brand value and the recognition. So far, like the way that Finding Bangladesh have been developed is in the fact that whatever we do, the brand value has to be there. Like it has to come out as good quality, and in terms of the message that we want to get to the young people has to be clear. Okay. So once again, it really depends on the person that you're pitching to, but like the pitch has to be gripping. Like, and this is something that everyone does in terms of when they're pitching. Like the emotion behind it matters more rather than the concept itself. Like I cannot explain to them that we have amazing animations in a pitch. Okay, especially when I can't use visuals. When it's just words, it's the concept and the idea and the emotion that's going to grip them.
That's actually super salesy advice, because one thing, one of the biggest rules in sales is that you don't sell the product, you sell the emotion behind the product. So again, this one of the more common scenes in Wolf of Wall Street was like, sell me this pen. And if you just this is something that many sales gurus and sales circuits use, like, sell me this pen or sell me this something. And generally people would go, but okay, so this pen writes really well, it's got the best ink and all that kind of stuff. And generally people don't gear towards that, but rather that, okay, this pen will make you, write like Shakespeare, or this pen will be the smoothest thing that'll, save you time kind of thing, or all that kind of stuff. And I think that's where the emotion or the actual need or demand kind of highlights, and also it creates value, like when you're providing value. And I think that's the most important thing in a pitch. Like when you're pitching to a brand, what actually are you, what value are you creating? Great animations is cool, but who's going to value? It's a feature. It's not the actual
product itself,
or the thing, or a problem it's solving. Rather, the same thing with phones. It's like, or phones or tech gears, anything like that. there's a separate specs page for the nerd outs and for you to actually go in details. But you won't see that on the front splash ever. It's images of how well a phone, like how good an image the phone takes, and the image is usually about people or hanging out or being in circumstances. So it's like providing, like, that's the value this thing's giving. So I think that's a super, I mean, you not being a salesperson, you still have mastered, not mastered, you still have you still use the rules of sales just almost instantly.
Thank you, because and I thank you for the feedback, because I know how much you work on that and in terms of the marketing, so that feedback is good for me. And one of the things, I think it's kind of like something I realized from my life, like of all the people that I've met in my life, people usually remember me not for what I do for them, but rather in terms of what emotion I impart on them. So even if I do, say, 5 or 6 amazing things for this or good things for this particular person, it's likely that person won't remember me 5 or 6 down the line, 6 years down the line. But if there is an emotional connection, good or bad, they tend to remember that. And
your students are quite a big fan of you, and I think that's probably why. Because I think you probably left a mark. Well, at least from what I see on social media, I don't know. I haven't spoken to. Maybe they fill up like content reports and they're back, and I don't know. But from what I've seen on the social media, they seem to be.
I gave them a lot of pressure, but we got along really well.
Right. Like, you're like the strict but loving parent kind of thing.
Yeah. It's like, I will chayer dokan adda marbo kono osubidha nei. I will teach you there and we'll discuss things. Awesome. But classroom I will be strict.
Fair enough. So having said all that, making money and going to pitch and stuff, and you've obviously successfully launched Finding Bangladesh 2 just couple years now.
It's going to be 2 years in a month.
2 years in a month. Yeah, there you go. So, because I remember before coming to Australia, you were running around and getting it done and getting the viewing and everything.
It's still not out publicly, but we've premiered it.
Right, exactly. We've premiered it for a certain crowd, and I guess the question was like, have you found Bangladesh yet?
I don't think so. Not yet. Not yet. Yeah, there's still more left. We still have to explore the north, especially Sylhet and Chittagong. And even then, we are only touching parts of, like, for example, for Finding Bangladesh 2, initially when we did our research, we had 42 locations planned out. And then when we were scouting, majority of them don't exist anymore. So we had to cancel them out from the script. We couldn't include them. So there are so many other stories that we have no idea about. Yeah. So the idea is whether we can actually be like a story bank, bring all of them together and see how those stories evolve.
You've always lived away from home. I'm not always, but you've lived in the United States, United Kingdom, and now you're in Australia. So how has that impacted your worldview, especially for someone who's so passionate about telling stories about Bangladesh? How has that, I guess, complemented your pursuit to tell stories and find Bangladesh?
One of the first things I would say that every time I go abroad, initially at least, the first time, there was a culture shock, not as much. But when I go back to Bangladesh, there is a counter-culture shock, depending on how much Bangladesh has changed exactly over the time that I've been away.
Just interject there. What's the longest you've been away, like in terms of visiting?
Oh, so never going back, or like
the gap between visiting Bangladesh?
Okay, so not that much. A year.
Okay, a year is your max. Okay, and even then you've had a few culture shocks. Interesting.
Yeah. Because people move fast. Let me just put it like that. And ideas move fast. Yeah. So even then you do get it. But so even like the 1 year gap, like when I went back to Bangladesh, it was like for 2 weeks or a week and stuff like that. But in terms of storytelling, I would say that living in different countries, the main advantage is that you get exposed to different stories and different methods of storytelling in different countries. Certain types of stories captivates the British more and in the UK, as opposed to if you go to Ireland and if you give the same story in the same manner, they probably won't find it interesting. Whereas at the same time, how you tell the story in America kind of like varies. So I feel like these different ways of reaching out to people and connecting with people varies from country to country, and that sort of gave helped in terms of how I shape my story.
Right.
Okay, like for example, if my audience is people from Bangladesh, Bangladeshi people like a certain type of humor, and we all know this from the TV shows, right?
Yeah,
and British people, if I'm going to do like that, I have to be, the humor, it tends to be more witty, and that reaches out to a more mass other people, like mind your language, right? So so it depends on where you're giving that pitch and who you're giving it to. So that really helped the exposure. But at the same time, it helped me in terms of understanding what stories shaped the British identity versus the American identity. And even within the stories that we have in Bangladesh, because so being in Scholastic and initially before heading out for the Finding Bangladesh part of the journey, I was essentially in a bubble. So a lot of those ideas while growing up were not really Bangladeshi ideas or stories. They were actually Western stories, because we read Greek and Roman mythologies a lot more than we read our own. So naturally those things kind of seep into you. So then I started to spot out, okay, what are the colonial ideas inside of me that are not really rudimentarily Bangladeshi? Okay, so then what is Bangladesh? And then you go through this entire phase of what is my identity.
Just go into this existential crisis.
Yeah. But then so right now, even if you ask me right now, who is a Bangladeshi or who is Bengali, because there's a Bangladeshi-Bengali debate always, I don't have a concrete answer yet. I think it's varies from person to person, how they grow up and everything. But what I know is what helps is, as you live in different countries, you start accepting yourself as more of a global citizen than just a Bangladeshi citizen.
So true.
Yeah, and that really opens up your mindset.
Absolutely. And it reminds me of Extraction, the film, right? And obviously the debate that followed after, like, that's not what Bangladesh looks like. It feels like all this, and obviously, it has some interesting debates and some interesting points as well as to what is and what isn't Bangladesh. But the most, I guess, the thing that interested me the most was how people with different viewpoints all said that this is not Bangladesh, right? And the other end is like, no, this is. Like, the whole idea of people showing, the film showing Bangladesh through the lens of, like the militants and child soldiers and, people robbing and killing and all that kind of stuff. Straight away, they're like, no, this is not Bangladesh, right? And they're like, oh, we've got so many. And then there was like this album going around of all these drone shots of Gulshan, and they're like, this is what Bangladesh is. Like, this is what Dhaka truly is. And the thing is, again, it goes to that binary feel. Like, there's that whole idea that if you have Gulshan doesn't mean that you don't have that problematic stuff. Like, it's all, like, Bangladesh is all of it, absolutely. Right? Like, Bangladesh is Gulshan. Bangladesh is, the slum. Bangladesh is the dirty roads, and Bangladesh is the high-end restaurants. It's all of it. And what we've tried to do is that anything that, because we're going through this global change all over the world, really, anything that isn't inherently Bangladeshi, we tend to discard it, or we tend to hold on to it just to show that, and then this whole idea of, like, who are you trying to please?
So the way that, Extraction was a fiction, first of all, so it's okay. I'm like, it's a fictional story, but at the same time, we have this tendency, and I think everyone has that, we have this tendency to romanticize our identity. So anything that gives that romantic appeal becomes inherently our identity. So it's difficult for us to accept or portray things in a negative light, even though those are still there. But you're absolutely right. Like, all of those, like, starting from the rickshaw pullers to the dirty slums to Puran Dhaka to Mamar, all the tongs that we have to Mamar Chap, all of this and everything in the rural areas, these are part of our Bangladesh.
Yeah.
What are the core values amongst all of that? That is debatable, absolutely. Correct. But then if you want a movie to really portray Bangladesh for what it is.
If anything, I think that's the beauty of it, because it's such a dynamic country.
Exactly.
Like, you show Statue of Liberty and everyone knows, okay, this is America. But even then, there's so many different elements, different states of different identities and different ways of living. And I think it's the same with Bangladesh, even though it's not as big as America in terms of size and it still has that really wide dynamic viewpoint, and through a creative work, you can't show it all. And that's why I guess it's great that we have Finding Bangladesh trying to tell the stories. But as a fictional film or as a content creator, it's impossible to capture. And at the end of it, as an individual creator, I feel that as long as you're telling your story and your point of view of your identity, whether it's about Bangladesh or not, you're contributing to that cause, and your effort and your contribution actually adds to the culture, to the identity of Bangladesh, and in general to the world. So I think that's what people miss, is that like we need to capture everything within a 90-minute fictional film, which is absurd.
Like one of the things that I really liked, so one of the historians that I was reading recently, the way that he approached identity was that follow the lives of 8 people or 10 people from different classes of life. Their life is basically what the identity of that community is. And I thought that approach was very interesting, because the moment we say Gulshan, Banani, Dhanmondi, it's a bubble, and it's a closed bubble. We don't know, or we're not exposed to, or we don't live the lives of the other people, right? And for them, they are in their own bubble, not exposed to that. So if you are going to say that this is inherently Bangladesh, what is that? If I don't know the lives of the other people, if I don't know the day-to-day lives of a school-going kid in Rangamati and a farmer, say, in Gaibandha.
Exactly. Like even Dhaka in itself is a bubble.
Exactly.
Right. Like it's completely different to, like you mentioned, like someone in Gaibandha, Rangamati, and
the tribal peoples, the indigenous people, they have so much variety. It's insane.
So I think to discard something completely because it doesn't contain all the colors of the spectrum, I think is ridiculous. I mean, those people getting upset about including why did the show there was this amazing sequence in the middle of the film, right, where Chris Hemsworth is just being chased chasing a really long one shot. I loved that scene. I wasn't a big fan of the film, but that was a really cool action sequence. And while he was going through the buildings, there was like Hindi songs playing, right? People were upset, like, this is not Bangladesh, like Hindi is not Bangladesh. Like, have you been to those areas? Like, have you never heard a Hindi song? I go to get a salon, like to a salon to get a haircut. It's Hindi songs playing on the TV, in the radio, and like how can you deny that? Like, okay, it doesn't represent what should be Bangladesh, perhaps, but it is what it is.
That's a very good point that you bring up, like the ideal in our head, the romanticized ideal versus
what it actually is.
Exactly.
Right. So I guess if you didn't travel as much, would the stories be different in Finding Bangladesh, or the way of telling the stories be different?
That's a difficult counterfactual. See, that's a question I do ask myself. Like, if I stayed back in Bangladesh entirely, would I be this invested in doing Finding Bangladesh? Or is it the fact that I live abroad and doing Bangladesh while still doing that and coming back and forth, going back and forth, creates a stronger pull of my own identity with Bangladesh? I don't have an answer, honestly. Okay, I want to say that yes, I would still be able to do that. Maybe not in the same approach. Okay, the approach would be different, but I don't know. Maybe I would never do Finding Bangladesh if that happens.
Super interesting, man. I think, like for me as well, I'm involved in so many projects in Bangladesh at the same time. Trying to have this global reach through the stuff that I make. It's like, I don't know if I would have had that if I just stayed in Bangladesh, right? I would be, again, being in that bubble and arguing if we should have added Hindi songs in this track or not. But I think it's important to actually have different, again, going back to the same point of view, that it's important to have that worldview. And I think a person definitely changes the way they view things if and once they've opened up to like other cultures, not just visiting, like, because I see a lot of people here in Australia and even like other countries who moved, but they have always stayed within that same circle. They don't integrate with other cultures, they don't integrate with other people. They've built their own Bangladeshi community and practice like like exactly the same thing that they would have done in Bangladesh. I mean, no one's stopping them, it's fine, but I think it's just such a waste of potential and building empathy at the end of the day. And I think that's what it does, really. It builds empathy, like travel builds empathy.
And you familiarize yourself with so many other things. And
so true.
Yeah.
Talk to me about your parents. I know you brought up your parents a fair bit in the conversation, but were they supportive afterwards? Like you mentioned that they were scared of you going out and doing this stuff, but what being the only child and trying to go into these old days, I guess typically not the most conservative routes through creative work and things like that. Have you had any issues with supportive?
I think after Finding Bangladesh 1 was premiered in 2008, my parents started believing in what I was doing, and they could finally see the potential in all of that. So afterwards, they were always very supportive.
Right.
Yeah. So even if whenever I wanted to go somewhere, they knew that I had a reason for doing this. It was not just I was going to go there and like get lost in drugs or stuff like that.
This is again like this is the same question I ask everyone, and it's a common theme, right? Like everyone's like, no, but once they saw my name on newspapers, once they heard me on the radio, they were like, oh no, you should keep on going. And this is very rarely we heard someone say no. They were like, yep, 100% go ahead, do this thing. So I think again, proving your credibility has been the major theme with this answer. Like once
absolutely.
you again, for creators who are struggling to get their parents to be on their side, I think it's super important that you actually prove yourself to an extent first with what you do, and then hopefully they'll see that you're not just wasting your time. And I think that's the route.
Like the other thing that I always mention, that the reason I could do all the things that I did is because alhamdulillah we have been at least a financially stable family,
right?
And I think that's a very important aspect of content and creative creators.
So true.
And like a content creator who does not have financial struggle versus one who has would be following completely different trajectories, right? So that really helped. Like if I had to financially support my family from an early age, I wouldn't be able to do any of that. So,
no, of course not. And I think that's why it is a luxury to be able to create content. I mean, now it's a little less because everyone's got a phone. To be fair, like if you really wanted to, you could literally just document you struggling and push it out on YouTube, and that becomes a vlog, and that becomes, you don't really have to point the camera at you. You could literally just document your life. And as have many people, like some of the people that I follow, this like wash dishes, right? Like and document that and turn it into a series and sold it to HBO kind of thing. So like I think that's the beauty of the internet to an extent.
True. And it's evolved so much.
Compared to like 10 years ago. But obviously we're talking, again, there's a certain barrier, right? People who can't even afford to have food on the table, that's a totally different story. But yeah, for sure, I think creating content is a privilege, and I think just being able to share your stories, that's why for me, as much as I don't dislike memes, and obviously, as you know, I send all kinds of memes. Memes are important, and I think it's super important to actually be able to laugh and stuff. But I think at the same time, it's just as important to be creating stuff that actually forms a part of, adds to the culture of progress, whatever it may look like down the road. Biggest failure, if any, and any lessons learned from it?
Way too many failures.
There's one I know very particularly well. Let's not go into that. But in general, I guess from a creative angle, were there any failures that you look back and like, that's the one that taught me everything I needed to know?
So in a way, for example, one of the things that always pops up and questions in my head as well, and something that you also pointed out as well, like Finding Bangladesh doesn't have the popularity that a lot of other mediums have, and that does feel like a failure at times. And that's where I think the biggest lesson is in terms of people who are able to balance creating the content and at the same time reaching out to people, creating that audience. Right. I think that balance is very important, and I still haven't reached that balance as of yet.
Right. Okay. And I think the way I mentioned is because I feel this again, like stories need to be told, right? Especially stories that have never been told before, and especially with finding Bangladesh, with what you've aimed to do. I see the potential as being endless, right? And whether striking that balance means that you have to sell out some, and when I say sell out, I mean you have to commercialize some aspects of it to be able to reach out to a mass. I think it's better to do so.
That's exactly the point where I struggle with personally. I was like, should I do that or not? And then there's the question of investing time, because PhD takes up so much time right now. I was like, I can't concentrate on some other project if I start it, so it's not started. So there is that debate. As an academic, we get rejections all the time from journals, articles. There are people who are criticizing your work all the time, and that's part of the process of evolution. My supervisor says that if you're going to be in academia, and especially in research, you need a very thick skin, or you
have
will
built a thick skin since.
I'm going through that crisis right now where it still affects me, but I know why it happens, because because whatever we say has to be foolproof. So hence all of that.
I think it's kind of similar to my journey during architecture when you had to present, like I think it's in Bangladesh they call it the jury, like when you present in front of the jury, right? But here, like we have to do and show it in front of everyone who done similar projects, and then you've got all these tutors who just tear it down to shreds, right? And it messes with your head, like it really makes you question stuff, like holy shit, like what did you spend 38 hours on right now? It was an important lesson because it did teach me how to not take things personally. And I think any content creator who's on social media would tell you the same, because while you're being torn to shreds by your colleagues and co-workers and people in the academia, posting of stuff online means you're open to more anonymous criticism, and anyone who's gotten any big would tell you that they get all sorts of comments, and I think it's a very important skill as a creator, whether you're in academia or in social media or anywhere else. You need to be able to grow a thick skin, but also be able to take
the criticism
in a way
that's constructive.
But at the same time, I feel like there's way too much negativity as well. Like I feel some people just go out of their way to hate, and that really bothers me, because I think some people wear that mask of constructive criticism and just channel towards negativity. And there's I just posted the status update just a couple of days back as well, where I said that, like people who tend to be negative generally are negative, and they don't channel the same energy towards something that's positive. And I think it's okay to be negative. I am pretty negative with stuff that I don't like seeing online and stuff like that, but when I see something good, I go out of my way to actually find the creator, send them a DM. Like literally you'll see my DMs are 10, 15 of them are just me telling, I love your work, I love that piece, I love that stuff, because I think
that's really good.
Because it's so easy to, even just the other day, you probably know her as well, Kazi Stella.
I
was speaking to her.
Stella's amazing.
She's so good, right, with her work, and she posted this video. It was like a nice little mini vlog on her story. It was like maybe 15 or 10 seconds, but it was so well edited, right? And I was like, yo, you should really start like a YouTube channel or just post more of these, because I really enjoyed that. And she's like, nah, I'm not sure. Like she was debating about, how she used to be more on social media, and she used to do like advertisements and commercials and stuff like that, but she hasn't, taken that leap now because she feels very self-aware, and there was this one comment in particular that really irked her back, when she was doing advertisements and stuff. And I told her, that's the tragedy, because 5 years down the line, me telling you that I loved this 10-second story, you won't remember it. But that one comment from that one person from 15 years ago, that'll still be in the back of your head every time. And that's the tragedy of content creators, because we remember the negative so much. Even if there's 100 positive stuff, we will just focus on that negative, and it'll kill us and consume us. And I think that's the most difficult part of creating. And that's why I said that, people who do criticize, it's fine, but make sure you balance it out, or try to even do more when it comes to things you like. Like I'm not saying just give out empty comments. But if you enjoy something, go out of your way and praise the person. Like, what are you losing out of it? If anything, you're adding, you're inspiring the people that you enjoy. And I think there's a big lack of that.
Yeah, I agree. That appreciation needs to go around a lot more. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think as creators, it's okay. It's important to have a thick skin, but I think as consumers of content, or if you enjoy something, it's just as important to if you can go out of your way to actually praise others.
Yeah. I think since Istila came up, there is this another group that I'm a part of, is the Global Shapers.
Of course,
in
yes.
Bangladesh,
Yes.
So, and I think that's the other aspect of being active in Bangladesh, especially socially. Like, and I feel like content creators, that's a side of content creation that a lot of people don't explore. And I haven't explored it in terms of content creation, but the activism aspect of being in Bangladesh, especially socially active through Global Shapers or House of Volunteers and all of that was a part of. So I think that's an aspect that's really important in Bangladesh as well. And the more people branch out to that, like Istila is doing amazing activism through her art, which I really appreciate. And everyone in Global Shapers is involved in some way or the other. Right. And so if content creators really start engaging in social community projects and activism, I feel like it will branch out their content creation in ways that people cannot initially think of. So I think that's another avenue that a lot of content creators can move towards. But
like if you believe in something, just make your art about it if you can. I think we're seeing a lot of that, and again, it's just me being too critical. I think I'm seeing too much of it these days, where people feel compelled that I have to I have to be woke with my content as well, and I think it shows. So I think again, striking that balance is important, because you don't talk about BLM because everyone's talking about BLM, right? You talk about BLM because you actually have a connection to BLM.
Be genuine, right? Exactly.
And again, it creates another problem because now the consumers are like, hey, those 5 creators are talking about BLM. Why aren't you talking about BLM? You're racist, right? And it's just such a weird tribal mentality that we have. And again, we spoke about that in details. I'm not going to go back into that rant again. Anyone in particular look up to right now in terms of, I guess, you could speak academia, but I don't know if my crowd would get that. But I guess in terms of content creation, documentaries, is there anyone you want Finding Bangladesh 3 to?
So I really like Michael Moore's approach to documentary making, especially Capitalism, A Love Story. That's one of my all-time favorites. Absolutely love how he approached the topic and the narrative he built in terms of content creation. In terms of academia, there are many academics that I can blurb about.
But it sounds like Omar is the one.
Omar Tushin definitely had a major role in terms of me coming into economics. But then there is, if I have to talk about a Bangladeshi researcher, it's Professor Mushfiq Mubarak. He's in Yale right now. He's teaching there, but I love his research work and the way he approaches and his storytelling ability. So, in terms of that, these are people I look up to. But growing up, my ideal was always Fazle Hassan Abed, Mohammad Yunus, and my dad.
Awesome.
It's and every time I say this, like all of my colleagues at Brack University, some of them used to jump up at me. Where is your female role model, man?
It's such an important thing, because just the other day I was looking at this topic, right? Someone said that ask a guy about a female role model without it being their mother or someone they know personally, they won't be able to answer. And I got stumped. I couldn't answer a female role model.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to say, that it's actually scary in terms of the lack of role models we have, at least in terms of gendered wise, the male and female balance that we need while growing up. And I feel like now it's a lot better than what we had while growing up.
Of course, I think that's the thing. I think it's more of a reflection of something that's happened as opposed to something that's happening now.
Yeah, exactly.
And also at the same time, I think, like if I have to say some role models, like my wife definitely is one of the, I speak about her to you all the time, is how insanely disciplined she is with her craft, with her work and stuff like that. But again, she is someone I know personally, right? And okay, let's say a female role model, right? If I have to say, like, think of one female role model, right?
Okay.
Celebrity,
okay.
right?
Okay, no, academic.
No.
Oh God. Okay.
Okay. Let's say a female role model celebrity, right? We're gonna say the name in 3 together, right? I've got one in mind. I just wanted to test this out. Okay.
It has to be a celebrity.
Celebrity female role model.
Okay.
But celebrity is someone famous.
Okay.
Doesn't have to be an actor or actress, something like that.
Yeah.
Anyone, okay. So 3, 2, 1. Oprah.
Begum Ruqayya.
Damn. I tried this out with a few of my other friends. They're like Oprah. I was like, holy shit.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And it's just the thing because your mind just goes into this, and I'm sure people within the same circuit would probably say Begum Ruqayya as well.
Yeah, that's probably because we read so much about Begum Ruqayya while growing up, so that we know her stories and all of that. But Oprah came to my life later, after her, so that's why Begum Ruqayya's name sort of like popped up first.
No, I think it's definitely changing, and I think it's also how much you resonate with someone as well.
Yeah,
like I speak about John Mayer all the time, and it's because I see it feels like he wrote my life through his songs, right? Like literal biography, and a lot of it comes from a male perspective. Some of my role models, in football, like I can't really pick a female footballer, right? It always was David Beckham, right? So it's like it's I don't think it's an intentional way of being sexist or misogynist, but again, I think it's definitely will change, and definitely it is changing down the line.
Yeah, like there was that conversation, and I'm sorry if I'm dragging this on.
Fine.
Just the last point is that there was this article that's called the Scully Effect, like people who saw X-Files while growing up, at least females, they tend to be more in the STEM and go into the sciences as opposed to people who did not grow up watching the X-Files.
Interesting.
That's a claim. I couldn't find the academic paper, so I don't agree with the finding.
Right now, if you
but
look
I agree
at
with the influence.
if you look at the occupation, like future occupation that children want to go into. America right now, it's YouTuber, vlogger, entertainer.
Oh wow.
In China, it's not that.
Okay.
It's still mathematician, astronaut. And again, this could be one of the ways of saying that America's dumb, but like one of those random memes. Again, I don't know how true that is, but I don't think it's entirely impossible because I know one of my nephews and nieces, actually looks up wanting to become a YouTuber / an astronaut.
Okay,
so it's like one or two extremes, right? But it's like it's that influence is there. Like we wouldn't have said YouTuber or something, but then again we would have said like musician, right? Or an actor. Like I think that the fame aspect has always been there. It's just changing the way. So I think it again depends on the individual and how they resonate with the characters they see in all the occupations that they're going to. What's your personal goal in 5 years?
Oh God. I think hopefully graduate and not be a grad student for one. But ideally I do want to finish my PhD and have a research project of my own that I do have ideas on what I want to explore after this. But that's something I really want to pursue. Like one of the goals is understanding the economics of Dhaka, like how beggars work and how the beggars networks operate, and what's happening in terms of domestic violence, what's the spatial distribution of domestic violence in Bangladesh. So there are a sequence of questions that I have regarding Bangladesh that haven't been answered yet. So ideally I would like to start exploring those aspects in 5 years.
Interesting you didn't mention finding Bangladesh 3.
Not yet.
It's not in 5 years?
Not yet.
No. You're going to take your time on that, aren't you?
Yeah.
Fair enough. So I think it's better to tell us.
My finding Bangladesh 3 target is 10 years, decade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So 10 years for the next documentary. That's going to be interesting. Finally, if someone who wants to walk your path of creating documentaries and balancing life, I guess, with academia or something else, what are the 3 actionable steps that they can take? So again, I ask this question to everyone, and I encourage to use actionable as the main point of the answer, because you could say dream big and do all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's like what are the 3 things that they can do?
First, be pragmatic. Do not set goals that you cannot reach. At the same time, do not set goals that are very easy to reach. So be very pragmatic in terms of how you approach it. Second is understand that the journey will not be fun. if you think that you're going to do it because you're going to enjoy it throughout, you won't. But your passion has to be there. So your passion can be fun sometimes. It can be not fun quite a lot of the times. But you have to be willing to guide through it, judge through it. If you're going to balance two things at the same time, you have to figure out how you're going to manage your own finances.
Right.
If you think that both of them are going to be money-making ventures, you're not effectively following your passion. But if neither of them are your money-making ventures, then how are you going to handle your finances? So
striking that balance again.
Yeah, striking that balance. Again, it falls down to being pragmatic.
Yeah.
But I think that's also something very important, at least in terms of your personal life.
Right. Yeah. Brilliant. Adnan, thank you for the coffee.
Thank you
for the
so
time.
Much. Thank you.
We'll do a fist bump to end. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Dost.